Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Organizers lost their bid to form a union at an Amazon warehouse in Alabama, but why they failed depends on who you ask.
Amazon misled and manipulated workers. They lied and tried to game the system.
In a minute, New York Times reporter Karen Weise will dig into how workers voted and why. But first, let's get you caught up. 13 people convicted in drug possession cases have been released from prison after having their sentences commuted by the governor. The release follows a recent ruling from the state Supreme Court in which the justices struck down a section of state law that makes simple drug possession a crime. Inslee is using his clemency authority to speed up some releases, while prosecutors and the courts are working to vacate sentences of other people convicted solely on the now invalidated statute. Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccines are being sidelined for now in Washington over concerns about blood clotting. The CDC says 6 patients out of nearly 7 million people who received the J&J vaccine have had problems with blood clots. Public Health Seattle-King County says people with appointments for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine at the high-volume site in Auburn should keep them. Expect to get the Moderna vaccine instead. Same thing in Tacoma. Pierce County Health Department says they're switching to the Moderna vaccine for those appointments. And the Employment Security Department is taking issue with a scathing report from the state auditor's office about the theft of millions of dollars in unemployment benefits at the start of the pandemic. Auditors say, in the end, the amount of fraudulent benefits paid could exceed $1 billion, far more than the $647 million identified by the department. The Employment Security Department disagrees with the auditor's findings. In a written response, it said the higher number represents a gross mischaracterization of possible fraud loss.
Our system is broken, and Amazon took full advantage of that. People should not presume that the results of this vote are in any way a validation of Amazon's working conditions and the way it treats its employees. Quite the contrary. The results demonstrate the powerful impact of employer intimidation and interference.
That's Stuart Applebaum, the president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, the union that tried unsuccessfully to organize Amazon warehouse workers in Bessemer, Alabama. The loss is being seen as a big blow for organized labor, with just under 30% of the votes in favor of unionization. Karen Weise says this has implications for Amazon workers and labor organizers all over the country, including here in Washington. She's the Seattle-based tech reporter for the New York Times. Karen, great to talk to you.
Happy to chat with you.
Thanks for taking the time. Let's start with the results, because about 30% of the votes that were tallied were in favor of forming a union, but that leaves nearly 3/4 of the votes against the move. What really resonated here? Why such a gap?
Yeah, there's a number of different things going on, because to vote in an election like this, to say, yes, I want a union, you basically have to be at a place where you say, not only do I dislike my job, but I feel like the union is the way I want to solve that. And so I think what you're seeing here is a reflection of both parts of that not hitting the mark that they needed. So if you listen to workers, some of them say, I like my job. I make $15 an hour outside of Birmingham, Alabama. It's more than the minimum wage, more than I made previously. And you also hear some workers saying, no, I have things I want to change. I want these Amazon to change, but I'm convinced I can do it internally. Or I don't want to spend the money on a union dues because I don't think I'm going to get enough out of it in return. So it's sort of a kind of a hybrid result, and it depends on the person, kind of where they fell.
Yeah, we heard as much from some Amazon employees. William and Levinette Stokes work at the warehouse in Bessemer, and they both voted no. Here's what they said about why they chose that vote at an Amazon press conference afterwards.
We have a list of things that we want to see change, but we just feel like we can do it without the union. Why pay the union to do what we can do ourselves? There are a lot of things that we feel are great at Amazon that don't need changing. So with this vote and not having the union here, we feel that we have control and as employees to do what we need to do.
And Karen, this is kind of what you were saying. It really gets to the issue of what you have that's guaranteed for you right now and the likelihood that the union will somehow better your existence at Amazon. I want to add a little context to this. What does it mean in a town like Bessemer, Alabama, for an employer like Amazon to be there?
Yeah, so Bessemer's in the outskirts of Birmingham, and it's actually an old steel and mining area. So it's kind of more like the Rust Belt than you might think is in the South typically. And it has come on kind of hard times as the, steel economies, swooned essentially. So it is a good, solid job in Bessemer. It's not outrageously more than the average wage in the town, but it is certainly more than you would see for retail work or if you work at the subway or other things like that. And it does seem to draw people from around the region, so not just in Bessemer, but from the greater Birmingham area as well. Someone just today was telling me they know people who drive more than an hour to the warehouse.
Right. So for a lot of people in the area, Amazon is not such a bad option. Whether or not they're completely happy there may not be the biggest part of the equation. All right. So this push clearly did not work. Organizers said it was because of Amazon's anti-union messaging in the workplace, which, according to the union, included misleading employees. Here's Linda Burns. She's one of the employees in Bessemer who organized for the union. Here's what she had to say.
Bezos, you're wrong. You are wrong all the way around. You misled a lot of our people. You told us they was going to take all our money. Where are you taking all our money?
Does what Linda is saying here hold up? Is it possible that some employees were swayed by misinformation from the company?
Yeah, I mean, there was a very aggressive they would say an education campaign was the language they would use. So there were text messages, mandatory meetings that, paid during your workday, banners all over the building, all that stuff. And, employers have the right to do that so long as they don't, make overt threats. And they just have an easier ability to access workers than unions do, because unions do not have the right to be on the private property. And there are other limitations they have. So, Amazon's messaging, again, this do it without dues theme, a lot of it was less about saying, you have a great job already. No one wants to be told they have a great job, although that was kind of, I would say, an underlying thing of $15 an hour and good benefits is here for you now. But it was a lot about sowing doubt about the union, what they could get for you, and then also about these dues. Why pay $500 a year to some union that may not even get anything for you?
Isn't Bessemer, though, in a right-to-work state where union members would not have to pay those dues if they elected not to?
That's accurate. Yep. And this was actually an interesting thing. Amazon kind of obviously did not highlight that fact, although I've also seen some criticism of the organizing. The organizers were saying, hey, you don't have to sign the union. You don't have to, pay for us. And that's not a good footing to start. Clearly they thought they had more support than they did. They had 2,000 people say that they wanted to hold a union election, but fewer than 1,000 people actually voted for a union. So you had, yes, turnover is an issue at Amazon. And so that could account for some of that erosion, but there was more than that. They clearly did not have the full throttled support they thought they did.
Amazon, the company, is known for having decent benefits. They raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour just a few years ago, and that is double the minimum in places like Alabama. Could all this attention this vote brought push the company to make other changes? Was this dialogue worth it in the end?
It's very interesting. And in some sense, the minimum wage change came because of criticism it faced. They said that, Jeff Bezos said that, we heard our critics. One thing that I've heard from experts, kind of labor economist type of folks, is that you don't get to this point where you have this big of a threat if everything's going great. So yes, Amazon may have won, but the question is, will they see and feel the kind of problems that got them to this point and try to address them? Or will they just say, we do $15 an hour, we got great benefits, we're good, we have no trouble hiring, we're good. And that's really a question for Amazon to answer in some sense.
So much of what we've been talking about at the heart of it is power, right? Who has the power? The workers, the employer. I wonder if there is a role for consumers in this conversation.
I would say historically, they're just consumers have not made a big priority over labor practices. And you see even stronger consumer behavior around like green, sustainability. But it's rare that you see a mass boycott or a mass kind of consumer movement away from a company just on labor practices. And there might be people on the edges trying that. But I just don't know of any really super strong examples in recent memory that would counter that. It's just how consumers are. And you have to remember, Amazon is extremely beloved by consumers. Yes, there are haters. Yes, there are doubters. But like more than 2/3 of American households are Prime members, pay money every single month to Amazon. The trust they've built up to bring you your product when you want it is extremely high. It is a source of great pride at the company. And that is very powerful. That is particularly in a pandemic year when people were stuck at home and you were able to order your everything to your door, and they brought it there.
And it'll be really interesting to see how Amazon factors into this new economy because, Karen, so many people have been conditioned to click and their stuff arrives.
Click and their stuff arrives. That's what Amazon does. I mean, at its core, it's interesting. It was clearly there was some sense of mission, I would say, during the pandemic. We were enabling people to stay home. And I think how this all levels off as the pandemic's hopefully finally begins subsiding will be interesting, both kind of from a mission-driven approach for people who work there and also just for consumers. Do people back off and return to their old ways, or do we keep these patterns entrenched? I think most people think it'll be somewhere in the middle. That you might go back to stores for some things, but you got your stuff on auto delivery now, and it's going to keep showing up
every 3 months. New York Times reporter Karen Weise, really good to talk to you. Thanks.
Sure, good to chat with you.
Seattle Now is produced by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.